Christian Onder is the CEO of Goobit AB, which owns and manages BTCX, a Bitcoin purchasing and exchange service in Europe. Christian, welcome to Software Engineering Daily.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Nice to be here.
What is Goobit?
Well, Goobit is a software company, but we have specialized in the blockchain technology. Most people are more familiar with Bitcoin, which is the currency that the technology uses, basically.
And so Goobit builds fintech applications on top of the blockchain. What are some example applications that you have built?
Well, basically what we're doing is mimicking the traditional financial system, but using on the blockchain. So we're building everything from basic exchange, buy and sell currencies, to point of sale where you can go to a store and pay with Bitcoin, and also wallet features so you can store and send Bitcoin. So basically everything in the traditional financial sector needs to be rebuilt, and that's basically what we're doing.
So as an example, let's touch on the point of sale solution that you offer. There's a Bitcoin point of sale solution. Could you tell me anything about the engineering behind that?
Yeah, basically it's HTML5 app. So the store owner can just use it from any mobile device or computer as he wants. And I'm not sure how deep in programming language you guys are interesting to know.
As deep as you're willing to go.
Okay, I get it.
Or as shallow.
Yeah, I haven't built the application myself. I have a team of people doing it. And I know for sure that the front is actually PHP. So it's really quick to go in and modify.
So from your perspective as the product designer, sort of, or the person that's managing the project, What is the spec? What are the requirements for that type of application?
Yeah, I mean, it's always security. When it comes to Bitcoin, everything needs to be secure. It's like building a bank, but better. So the specs I give, it has to be really secure, and then it also needs to be fast. When you pay in a store, I mean, you're competing with Visa, which has a limit on, 3 seconds per transaction. I know sometimes it takes longer, but we need to be below that. So my specs were this. For this app, I said 1 second per transaction. And then they managed to build that. So it's
and do you have security experts that you talk to that you say this is I need it to be secure. I don't exactly know what security means, but I trust you to impose security that is safe from the traditional computer science attacks, or do you have some background in security that you yourself can specify what things you're concerned about?
I would say a little bit of both. I have no security background, but I'm trained in computing. I'm actually my background is quantum physics, and I also studied quantum computing at the university. So I have a lot of knowledge in that. So I go in and kind of look and come with proposals, and we have a dialogue, basically.
What are the typical security concerns that a Bitcoin application has to be worried about?
It's the private key of the Bitcoin. How to store it or how to not store it. I mean, that's the biggest question we need to solve in each part of the application. I mean, when we're taking when a customer pay Bitcoin in the point of sale, the Bitcoin goes to the first address that we generate, and then we move it on, and then we store it. So there's like 3 or 4 stages where the Bitcoin is, and all of the stages have different security aspects.
Fascinating. Has there been any actually, well, okay. Let's talk about BTCX.
Yeah.
What is BTCX?
Yeah, BTCX is an online exchange service. Basically, that one I built completely myself. We were quite early. We started in 2012. It was one of the first Bitcoin companies in Europe, and I just wanted to see if there was an interest in buying Bitcoin. So I put up a page, basically say, "Hi guys, I'm selling Bitcoin. This is the price, and here is what you pay." And it took off pretty fast. Today it's basically just an automated way of buying Bitcoins really fast. I think today you get it in 30 seconds if you're a Swedish customer.
Yeah, this is actually like a really important solution, because I was talking to Andreas Antonopoulos, and he was saying that the reason that more people don't buy Bitcoin, even just as like a speculative currency, is basically because it's really hard to buy still.
Yeah, and that's true. In Sweden it's really simple because we have almost everyone has a mobile payment system app, and we're hooked up to that system. So you basically just take your phone and you swish away 1,000 Swedish kroner, and then you have your Bitcoins within 30 seconds. But as soon as you come outside of Sweden, it's up to each country and the banks in that country what the customer can use.
How does a Bitcoin exchange connect to the rest of the Bitcoin world?
Yeah, I think it's different. Each exchange has its own solution. Of course, we use the classical Bitcoin core, Bitcoin daemon to communicate with the Bitcoin network. But then running in a Bitcoin exchange is a central solution building usually on top of the banking system. So I would say the integration to the Bitcoin network or the community is the easy part, and the banking system is the hard part.
Right. Yeah, I watched a video where you said that like most of your work these days is dealing with compliance issues. What is the difference between dealing with compliance issues of a conventional banking world versus dealing with the day-to-day problems of running an engineering company?
Interesting question. I could say that one of the biggest challenges we face is to have a good connection with a Swedish bank. Mostly, they say that it's because of compliance and stuff like that. But I think they don't know how to handle Bitcoin itself. And
wait, so when you say good connection, do you mean like a reliable connection, or like what exactly do you mean by connection?
You need to know someone in the bank who can take your side, because I would say in every bank right now they have a policy around virtual currencies, and as soon as they higher up in the bank says, okay, we have a Bitcoin company, what to do? If no one is there to take your side, you will probably have your bank account closed. So it's good. You can have the bank as an investor. That is a very good way. Or maybe you know someone in the bank, or through a consultant services, or you just have a really good professional connection with someone high up in the bank. That would also work.
So let's say you have that connection. How? Let's say you know the bank is invested in you as a Bitcoin application developer. What is the next step? How do you integrate with them engineering wise? Like, do they provide you with some sort of API or some sort of spec? Like, here's how you integrate with us.
Yeah, in Sweden and Europe, we have this system. It's called Bank Giro Central, which is a way how to handle payments across Europe. Unfortunately, it's slow and expensive, but that's one way to communicate. And then what actually you do is you set up a FTP server and you're sending payment files back and forth.
Wow.
Yeah, and the specs are made from the 80s, kind of. So it's
primitive.
Yeah. It's primitive. All my developers, they look at the specs and like, what the fuck? So we have that, but then we also have another solution. And since not so many banks in Sweden are offering an API, and there's actually one bank who is offering the API, but it's super expensive. So today we cannot afford it. So what we're doing, we're actually building a crawler application. So we're actually crawling we're logging into our internet bank and crawling and doing actions like a web browser.
Wait, okay, so could you describe that in more detail? That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating, but it feels kind of ugly also. Well, basically we simulate...
Well, at least you're transparent about it.
Yeah, so we're simulating a web browser, so we're going in and do all the actions as we want to do in an API, but we do it in a web browser script. So it's actually running around the clock, going through all our accounts once a minute and see if something is happening or if something needs to be done.
Okay, so I'm confused. Like, so you're crawling, so it's like a user submits a request and then you have a crawler that crawls those requests and then you process them?
Well, for taking an example, if one of our users want to buy Bitcoin, they do a bank transaction and poof, we have a new transaction in our bank. And how do we know that? How do we know that the user had paid? Well, we have I don't know if crawler is the right word, maybe spider or I don't know. But then this, let's call it crawler, is logged into our internet bank and say, poof, a new transaction, and then reads that transaction line, and then we know who has paid that money. So that's basically it.
Fascinating. Okay, so how does actually, so many questions. So a question about, what's the deal with, you mentioned an expensive API that actually works. What's the story behind that bank, and what does that API look like in the best of breed scenario?
I haven't seen the API myself. I just heard about it.
It's just better than FTP.
I hope. But basically, the bigger financial institutions in Sweden, they have access to that API. And I guess that you just get all the information you need from all the transactions, and you can make, as you said, it's better than FTP, and probably it's also instant. The Bank Giro Centralen's FTP solution, all transactions take 1 bank day. And by the way, our new slogan is you can buy Bitcoins in 1 bank minute. Because we want to make fun out of the bank day thing we have all over the world. It's just, I don't know, old.
Yeah, it is old. So what kind of transaction volume are you handling?
In a good month in Sweden, we have around 3 million Swedish kroner. We have to check that up, what that is in dollars. But I would say it's around 400 Did
your did your transaction volume change with the recent Ethereum trading volume?
No, it hasn't. But Ethereum is still quite unknown in Sweden. So it's. I think it will take some time before we notice anything.
Is that because, like, are most of your customers more Main Street type of people, and the people that might be influenced by Ethereum trading, those are people who kind of have maybe more of a technical background, so they don't really have a need for the friendly user-facing API that you provide?
Yeah, I think that's a good assumption. Most of our customers are investors who think Bitcoin is a really interesting investing tool. And they might be technical, but they might not be. And then the other customer type we have is a consumer. They buy Bitcoin because they want to buy something online. And neither of those two are, Ethereum is not a use case for them yet.
So you've described some of the aspects of your company and the engineering. What are what is it? Describe to me what it's like to build a company that does engineering around Bitcoin, because this is somewhat of a new idea, and the collision with Main Street banks is happening, and it involves lots of interesting integration. So I'm just curious what the engineering process, the macro engineering process, is like for you.
Yeah, do you think from the whole company or the technical?
Whatever is interesting, whatever you think would surprise me, whatever would be useful, or maybe it's very similar to building a traditional finance technology company like Square. Maybe it has the same kinds of issues. I don't know. I'm just curious.
Yeah, from my perspective, from building the company, it's been a lot of fun building a Bitcoin company. Wherever I go, with whomever I talk, there is a reaction. Either it could be, "Oh, you will go to jail," or "Wow, that's awesome! I want to be part of this." And just recently, I was in Almedalen, which is Sweden's biggest political event. And John Matonis was there just a day before me and was talking about Bitcoin. And basically what he did, I don't know what he said, but when I came there and said, I'm running a Bitcoin company, I was invited to all the mingles. I was invited to all the fancy parties and got drinks, and I had to talk everywhere with everyone. It was really fun. So people are really waking up to Bitcoin and see its potential in the blockchain. And from that perspective, it's really interesting to build a blockchain technology company. Because
it sounds almost like in 2000, or well, not 2000, but maybe 1998 or 1999, where if you knew HTML, you got invited to all the cool parties in New York.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. But then when you get home, you have a letter from the bank saying, "Hello, we want to have a meeting with you." And then you have to go to the bank, bring your finance guys with you, and you have to answer tricky questions. And you really need to overprove the bank, 3 times overprove them that there's no money laundering going on. And that's another aspect. I've been invited to the Swedish Central Bank to a meeting and meet all other financial institutions. And the person from the central bank, I think Bitcoin is also an interesting thing. So let's say all the other governmental entities are also looking into Bitcoin. So the central bank is inviting me to meetings, and really good, because then I can interact with all the other technology companies, fintech companies in Sweden. But then we have IRS, Skatteverket, who's dealing with tax frauds and stuff. They're also interested in Bitcoin, and they're not so. When they come to say hello. They're not asking the nice question you want to hear. They're asking the yeah.
That's fascinating. So a couple questions. So I'm curious, like when the banks call you in and I don't know, harass you or ask you about the money laundering. What is that process of diplomacy like, or like what helps that process? Is it important for you to have transparency? Is it important for you to have lots of documentation and transaction history that's heavily logged, or what are the important parts of that negotiation process?
Yeah, transparency is the number one key. If you're
Isn't
not
that ironic, because these banks are like historically non-transparent?
Yeah, I think the bank wants to have the power. So they want to know everything about you without giving anything to you. And that's a classic power game. And until I'm running my own bank, it's just the way I need to play, basically. But not all banks are like that. So the smaller the bank is, the nicer they are. And then we have some very Bitcoin-friendly banks. In Germany, you have Fidor Bank. In Sweden, you have a small, it's actually a member-owned bank called Jakbanken, which actually the CEO of the bank came to me and we were discussing Bitcoin for hours and hours. But then again, if you want to have a good way of doing your transaction, you need to have one of the bigger banks, at least in Sweden, because it's such a small country. So then transparency and all the documents regarding KYC and money laundering. And it's also good if you have like a financial expert with you, so they can ask question regarding finance of the company and also to bring the bookkeeping of the company.
You mentioned Fidor Bank. I think Fidor is closely integrated with Ripple. Do you know if that's true?
Good question. I know they're closely working with the Kraken.
What's that?
Kraken. It's another Bitcoin.
Oh, Kraken, right.
Yeah. Ripple, I don't know. I don't know.
Is there like this race to have the best currency transaction system that can service the pre-existing banks? Because like these banks are like scrambling around and they like have no idea what they're supposed to do with this cryptocurrency space, and there's like this race to be the one-size-fits-all bank integration platform application, because like having all the banks as your customer is like a pretty good business.
Yes, yeah, I would agree with that. That's, I mean, I can just look at myself and that's what I'm thinking of. So I am talking with the Swedish banks now, and I am offering different solutions, and we'll see what the tricky part is they don't know what they want, and I don't know really what I want to give them. So I think it's a really we're exploring the scene, but then there are some.
I mean, it's also interesting because you're like the point of arbitrage between customers, between your users, your customers, the people, but also between the banks, who are like their historic strategies to screw over the customers as much as possible. So you exist as an arbitrage between those two. Like presumably, like the banks still want to maintain some component of screwing over their customers, and the users presumably do not want to be screwed over. So you're like this dial between those two sides.
Yeah, so I'm giving the customers a really nice time, and then I'm getting screwed by the banks and everyone. So that's yeah, but I'm getting paid for it. Yeah, but the idea is to to make it seamlessly to go in and out between cryptocurrencies and normal traditional currencies. And our vision is also to have our own bank-alike system where you can pay your bills, you can do your transactions, you can have your savings, and it's not that far off of having that solution. But for running that, we really need to partner up with a bank who likes us and our ideas.
So what is the strategic roadmap there? How do you say, I know that my eventuality is that I want to become a bank, but while simultaneously realizing you need to partner with a bank in the meantime? I mean, is this sort of like you just constantly go for like the local maxima and then eventually you claw your way towards becoming a bank, or what is the strategy like?
Right now, it would be to have a bank as an investor. And the things we need to have a bank license for, we give to the bank. And the things we can do ourselves, like the crypto space, we do. And I think if we find the right bank, that would be a good division, because then we don't need to do the banking stuff and they don't need to touch the crypto stuff. And then it's neatly separated in two different legal entities.
Could you describe those sets of requirements that that they would have to do versus what you would have to do, the crypto stuff versus the banking stuff?
I would say the exchange part would be on our hand. Between back and forth currencies, and then when we're doing a transaction in the crypto space, that would be ours. Because when a bank do a transaction, they need to know 100% sure who is the sender and the receiver. In a crypto transaction, that's quite hard, and and that's easier for us because we don't really have that requirement.
So how do you resolve that tension?
Well, I haven't yet. That's the $1 million question.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
How do you think about Bitcoin versus Ripple and Stellar and Ethereum and these other currencies, these other platforms? Do you just basically say, I'm just going to focus on Bitcoin because if I get Bitcoin right, I can probably figure out these other things?
Yes, that's a major question, actually. I've been looking into Ripple for a very long time, and I think Ripple is a really cool system. And Bitcoin is also a very cool system. And now with Ethereum really going live, and it's I could say that the strategy is not clear. I think in the future we will have all three of these systems for sure, but probably even more. And the question is how. When you run a company like I am, it's good to be focused on one thing and do that good, and then cooperate with other companies who's focusing on their thing, and then have a strong cooperation.
So with a mind to that focus, is your focus Bitcoin? Like, are you just a laser lens focused on getting Bitcoin payment integration correct?
Yeah, I am. That's the main focus. But hopefully, my goal is to get all that Bitcoin payment transaction being more or less automated, because it's possible just to make it a running machine and then have some people doing service and support. And
I think it's very clear that is an attainable goal, because it's sort of like we're in this time where it's like, yeah, you have to connect all the little hooks into the mail server, and it's or like the TCP. You're like a TCP routing point. It's like that's not a business that needs to be high touch in the future.
No, exactly. I think it's a good position to be in and have it automated, and like it's becoming a good. We could call it a money machine from that we can build more applications and have a solid income.
So when you have been looking at Ripple over the past couple of years and comparing it to Bitcoin, and then maybe even if you've looked at Ethereum in detail, what are the salient comparisons between Bitcoin and Ripple, or Bitcoin and Ethereum, or Ethereum versus Ripple?
I still think Bitcoin will become a world currency, used currency, like a world currency. And Ripple is a really interesting way of decentralization of transaction between different things, between currencies, between. I was looking very much into like how would a decentralized stock market look like? Yeah, it could be Ripple fueling that system. And so I think in the future, Ripple or Ethereum might play a really important role of bridging all these thousands of cryptocurrencies we have, when probably we'll just have even more different systems. With Ethereum now, you can just build your script or your machine, and you can have more and more just automated and scripted, and it's to connect all these worlds.
Is the future where everybody has their own currency? Like, am I going to have Jeff coin and you're going to have Christian coin, and we're going to pay for stuff in our own self-issued currencies?
We might have. I'm not sure. I mean, it's what would be the use case to have your own currency? It's not really clear for me. But I'm
well, presumably, if you're saying like the current state of affairs is, oh, you need your own currency. You need you need a U.S. currency in order to buy things in the United States. You need a German currency to buy things in Germany. Presumably, the absurd natural extrapolation to that is, oh, if you want to buy stuff from Jeff, you need Jeff coin. If you want to buy stuff from Christian, you need Christian coin.
Yeah. I don't think it will go that far. Of course, it will. But I mean, it's probably already happening. Someone has his own coin of his own name. But I'm not sure if it's if the benefits
like what if Apple said, in order to buy an iPhone you need Apple coin, and you pay on Apple Pay, and the only way is through Apple coin?
Yeah, I mean that might definitely happen, and I don't see it as a problem really. It's just then we need a system to hook all these coins together, and that will also happen.
So I'd love to get your thought. You mentioned a decentralized stock market. I think the current markets are some weird stuff is happening right now. Like, for example, it's just you've got all these startup unicorn companies. None of them are going public. So it's like, what's going on? Are we having this movement towards private markets, or some sort of gradient between private markets and public markets? So then we have this other segregated market of decentralized currencies, and it's like, what does the future look like? You mentioned decentralized stock market. What does that look like to you?
For me, it looks like you are a farmer in a country somewhere, and you're growing apples or coffee beans or something, and then you're just issuing like, oh, I have 3 tons of apple, and you're just issuing it on a decentralized market, and anyone can buy that. It's like a contract, smart contract actually, and in the end, someone is buying it and selling it and rebuying it and going around the world. And then we have the local grocery store here in Sweden. Like, okay, we need some apples. Oh, look, here we have a farmer from faraway land who is selling apples. Okay, perfect. And they're buying that smart contract, and then they cash it in. And of course, when you cash it in, you need to have a contact with the issuer and a transportation made. And that is also an area. I mean, transportation. The transportation system today is kind of not decentralized, but it's kind of, you're sending one thing through several different trains or trucks.
Yeah, and like the vision that you're portraying is like this apple farmer has some apples he wants to sell, and he can just do it through some decentralized marketplace. And so instead of the current system where the people that have the power are like people that can create those contracts, or the shipping container companies, or the transportation companies, the apple farmer has to comply with those companies. Whereas in the future, it would more be like, you've got to comply with the apple farmer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And maybe there is a droid coming and picking up the apples.
Yes.
And maybe the droids are maybe you just put in like, I want to have ship this apple, and I put like a transaction fee, 0.1 Bitcoin, and then maybe no one is interested in that. But then 0.12, and then like a droid who wants some Bitcoin to refuel its batteries, who is completely self-sufficient, takes and ships the apples, and then gets some Bitcoin, and then it can. So in the future, we might also have AI running droids, earning Bitcoin. I mean, it might be a completely AI-driven droid who's taking over some work from transporter people.
So some people listening right now might be saying, like, this is like techno-utopia, vaporware, insanity that these guys are talking about. Yeah. What are the biggest hurdles, the biggest difficulties that the world needs to overcome in order to reach this sort of techno-utopic, apple farmer, power to the people type of scenario?
I think technology happens, and it doesn't matter if you like it or not. If it's being used, it will, and if it gives a benefit, it will be used. And if it's like when you had coins. When you have in Sweden, we actually had the biggest and heaviest coin in the world. With one copper coin, with 21 kilo something. And then someone said, okay, let's change the coin to a paper bill. And it was so popular because you didn't need to carry around all the things. You can just have a paper bill. And actually, it was banned in Sweden for 50 years, paper bills, because the bank who gave the bill misused the position and printed more bills than they actually had money, which is happening all over again with the banks today. But anyway, the people of Sweden still use the bill, even though it was banned. And the reason was the benefits is bigger than the threat. And so the biggest hurdle, you can say it's time, or you can say the biggest hurdle is the resistance from the existing infrastructure. But that will always be overcome during a period of time.
Do you worry at all about more like bigger, more existential looming threats, like Russia decides to launch a nuke or something, or like China's stock market collapses and that causes worldwide chaos, and that destabilizes everything, so we can't actually get all this techno-utopia stuff done? Does that stuff bother you, or do you think that's like Chicken Little, people being too scared type of talking?
No, it's not bothering me, and I'm not sure how real that threat actually is. I mean, Russia sending a nuke, what would they gain by it? I mean,
I don't mean specifically like, Russia's going to send a nuke. I just mean types of sociological, political, existential threats to humanity that would impede us from actually being able to realize the utopia type future promised by decentralized technology?
Yeah, I no and yes. I think what I'm fearing is maybe maybe what we're seeing. I mean, internet was an expression of freedom, but today it's an expression of surveillance, where you have surveillance apps in phones, in computers, everywhere, and so then today Bitcoin is freedom, but maybe tomorrow Bitcoin is super monitored by all the governments, and all the transactions are logged, and everyone knows who everyone is. That might be a fear. And I mean, also I'm a big fan of Matrix. That would also be a very sad sad ending of the human storyline if we ended up as batteries in a Matrix simulation. But I don't think China or Russia or anything else is that bad.
So the Matrix simulation, that thing, that's interesting. Like, I had Melanie Swan on here, and she was talking about blockchain, and she was saying she believes that blockchain presents technological solutions that are insurance against the type of AI concerns that Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk have. Do you agree with that?
Interesting. I would really like to talk with her about that. I don't see how blockchain would protect from that.
Well, so the idea is, I think her basic idea, she said she's written a lot about this, but I haven't read much about it. But my understanding is her basic idea is like, the blockchain you can think of as, you have to submit philosophical perspectives to it. And if a malicious AI submitted a philosophical perspective that was, in order to do the best for humans that we need to do, we need to put them into battery matrix type of situations, then other people on the blockchain would be like, hell no, we don't want that. And also we are never trusting this malicious AI node again.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe they start their own blockchain who's not available for us. That could also be a...
Right, see, that's true, and that's like, I think her, if I'm interpreting her argument correctly, then it's like, well, I think that presumes that the humans can somehow outthink these malicious AI that have sidechained or whatever, which is probably wrong, but then again, maybe it'll be good to be in the Matrix, and so who knows? I don't know. That's a little too far flung. So let's go back to reality. So conventional stock markets have lots of players. You've got individual traders, you've got market makers, hedge funds. This is like the traditional Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch type of world. So how does that differ from the types of players that you see in the Bitcoin exchange world?
What I see in the Bitcoin exchange world is they are mimicking the traditional services. I think mostly because the services that we already have are good, and we also need them in the crypto space. What I'm also seeing is like the OMX, the stock exchange in Stockholm, they are really interested in the blockchain and how to issue stocks, virtual stocks, and how to just put them out in a decentralized marketplace. So I think Stockholm Stock Exchange will definitely go that way, or acquire some companies who are doing it. Yeah.
So I watched an interview where you said, quote, "We live in a democratic world, but finance is less democratic. You cannot choose your currency," end quote. Why is currency choice so important to the individual?
This is, I would say this is also a very ideological question. But also, depending on what country you grew up in and what government you have, Basically, the government decide your currency, and if it's a good government with a good bank, then we're all fine and dandy. But then there's also this question in Sweden, which is a good government, and we have a good central bank and stuff like that, but you still don't have any choice over your currency. Like Riksbanken, the Swedish Riksbank, they printed up tons of money to lend to Greece a few years back, and there's basically nothing you can do about it. It's like the Swedish government is taking maybe not your money, but the value of your money and playing with it. And as a citizen, I think it's fair to have a choice to have money where not someone else is gambling with its value. And basically, the only money where I don't know any money that is possible today, but I think it's good to explore that and to have more currencies. And maybe that's maybe that's why you should have your own currency also, because then no one else is controlling it than you.
What is at the intersection of... Actually, you know what? That brings up an interesting question. So let's imagine this world where we all start creating our own currencies. Do you think this could lead to such a chaotic financial system that it would be hard to get stuff done?
No. We just have. I mean, it's like the internet. You don't monitor the TCP/IP packets. You just open Skype or Chrome and you send information in PDF files. What's happening beneath, you don't need to worry about. And it will be the same with currencies. You're just sending value, and it might pass through thousands of different currencies on the way. And it really doesn't matter.
What is at the intersection of blockchain technology and taxation?
All right. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Tax money is everyone's money, at least in that country. And they should be trackable, transparent, and so for the government to use a blockchain for all tax money and all spending, that would be a very a good choice.
How would tax systems work in your ideal world?
That's also a very good question. I have some thoughts about that.
What are your most revolutionary thoughts?
That would be before I began with Bitcoin, and I also have this party called Bitcoin Party. Before all that, I was in a party called Liquid Democracy. Also in Sweden, and basically all decisions which is being made by the government, you have the say in that. You can go in and have a vote on each specific question, area or bigger. And I would say one really interesting, I go with interesting way to have a tax society is that you vote on whatever, each question, and you can also put money into it. So it's like the tax system becomes like a crowdfunding event. Oh, we want to build a new school. Okay, you have the tax money, but you can also add money to the school. So maybe 50% of your tax is just reserved. Or why not say 100% of the tax is reserved? So you have to pay it, but you can choose yourself what to put it on. Oh, new street lights, oh, new school, no lower tax over here, or whatever. that would be a really interesting world to live in, to see how that would be, because then basically you put all the power down at the people's level, and the politicians are just executing the will of the people. So there's no hidden agenda.
Yes, I completely agree. So to begin to close off, what is on the roadmap for Goobit, and how can an engineer listening to this, if he wants to come and work at Goobit, how can he get involved? What are the opportunities there?
Well, we have many opportunities. We run different platforms. Basically, we say to our engineer, we want a solution, we have a problem, and we want to build this. And then the engineer can choose his own technical solution. So all engineers has their own set of microservers where they can choose their own technology, and everything is communicating with APIs. Today we have different angles we want to explore, of course. So a good way to start is just to contribute to one of our projects and just email us and see what's going on. We have some open source projects, and we have some bug bounty projects and stuff like that.
Fantastic. That sounds great. Well, Christian Ander, thank you so much for coming on Software Engineering Daily. It's been a really fascinating, enlightening conversation.
Yes. So thank you, Jeff.